Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. Happy New Year. It is now 2026. I have to write that on everything now. It's amazing. And time is such an interesting thing, isn't it? And every year we see time go forward. So powerful stuff. And I got to tell you right now, we have some very powerful alignments coming together. We've got the sun and Mercury, I should say, not Mercury, Venus. Venus is going to hit the sun on the 6th, which is 2 days from now. We're going to have the Venus Mars conjunction on the 7th. And the one I've been talking about a little bit here for a while is the Sun Mars conjunction will happen on the 8th. And look at what's happened. We see a lot of tensions in the world right now. We've got things like violence in Iran. And I've actually had clients ask me, one in particular, who has connections to Tehran. I have many clients from Tehran over the years, and they're saying, is the government going to fall? And what we're seeing is huge riots over there. And I get that it's likely to have regime change, especially now that you've got Trump saying that he's actually going to back the people if they start slaughtering them. So this is going to be an interesting thing and how it plays out. And another thing, of course, everybody's been talking about the Venezuela thing where, Maduro and his wife were taken out with this surgical, hit that the military did. And he's already sitting in chains in New York waiting for trial. I guess he's going to be arraigned on Monday. So, kind of fits the alignments right now. And again, we've got the still ongoing war over in Ukraine and Russia. And, every time there's peace moving forward, Russia just launches more drones and missiles. Again, I say there's stuff going on with that one that is very mysterious. I think that rabbit hole goes far deeper than we're being told by any of the media. And that's what the astrology shows too. And I have to tell you, all of this is leading up to this very powerful conjunction of Saturn and Neptune, which happens February 20th. So over this next week, this is a very intense time right now because of these alignments. And here I'll show you actually, let me see if I can share the screen here. My cursor's not working too well. There we go. So if I can do this, without taking too much time. There we go. So you can see here, when I get this up, there's an alignment right now that's really, really strong. And the easiest way to show you is on this chart here. And, for you on small screens, you're going to have to zoom in. But you can see all these planets up here at the midheaven. A lot of alignments going on right now. So we're going to have Venus go into the conjunction of the sun right there. Then shortly thereafter, you're going to have Mercury hit the sun as well, too. So all of this is definitely affecting energies right now. We're also going to have a Sun-Pluto conjunction. That one's going to kick in here in just about 6 days from now, 6.5 days. So it's very powerful stuff here that's going on. And actually, no, that's the Sun opposition Jupiter. Now, all these are technical things in astrology, but it's interesting to see how the world reacts to it. The energies are so powerful right now. And I've got a number of clients who have experienced this Saturn-Neptune closeness that's going to peak in February. And it's been really hard on some people. If you've got this transiting your ascendant or you've got it squaring something in your chart, you're really going to feel it. If you have it making positive aspects, you're probably going to have real spiritual and positive growths and structures in your life. So this stuff is powerful and it affects everybody uniquely and individually different. So, it's a powerful time right now in the world. And, all the astrologers are talking about this. And by the way, later today, I'm actually going to be on a show here, which is, what is it? It's Quite Frankly. So I think I'm on there at 4:00 this afternoon, Pacific time. And we're going to be talking more about this. And that's another thing, too, I might add. We're going to try and go back to pre-recorded productions here rather than me doing all these lives. I love the lives because it's cut and dried. I'm just done. I don't have to edit. It's quick and it's fast. and I get back to my work. But we're trying to set it up right now where Ella and I will be coming back with guests as well as with you know, pre-recorded stuff. So my big thing is I don't want to spend 8 to 10 hours a day editing, and we're trying to get ways to make that be more efficient, which is happening. So, yeah, someone's asking here, how about the silver market? It's Trump's silver bullet. I think silver is going to keep on going. That's what I think, and it could hit a very high level. Everyone's talking about silver. I've actually cast charts on that. And one of the things for sure, this big AI push, I used to teach this in a physics class. Silver has the most free valence electrons. What does that mean in plain English? Well, every atom is surrounded by electrons, right? Well, silver is actually one of the densest electrical atoms for propagation of electricity. And this is why all the audiophiles, I remember back in the 80s and the 90s, I used to modify microphones and I would do all this different stuff where we would make audio equipment sound really good. And all the studios out here have done that for years. And now that the AI pushes on, everybody wants silver. Well, what do you think that's going to do to the silver market? It's going to keep driving prices up. They don't have enough. And another thing you're going to see, and I think this is a real another area to look into, they're going to start opening up the silver and gold mines that have been capped off in this country since the 1800s. And I think you'll see a big push on that. So silver's likely to go much higher, and I think gold will too. And I'll tell you, that's something to look into. I think anyone not getting a little silver is probably missing the boat because it's going to go up, and I think it's going to keep going up. And what I like about precious metals is they don't lose value. I mean, it's very unlikely we're going to see silver and gold crash down to nothing, especially with the demand that's there. So there's a real, I think, look into that I would take if you're investing into stuff. Not that I can give you any medical or investing advices, but I would tell you that that one looks good. I'll tell you that's what the chart has been saying consistently. Yeah, someone's mentioning here copper is next. Copper is really gone up in value. I know I have in the past seen huge industrial salvage operations, especially out here in California, since they have been taking the state apart. Copper is, again, going to become very valuable. Copper is the next most conductive metal. First it's silver, then copper, then it's gold. Everybody says, well, I thought gold was the best. No, gold is actually third down on the ladder. But what's so good about gold is it doesn't tarnish. So, and gold is what? Pushing $4,500 an ounce. It's dancing up and down a little bit. So these precious metals are definitely going to keep heading up, in my opinion. That's what the charts show. And I would tell you that, what's good about it, you can't throw your money in a bank easy and get that kind of gains right now. So, and I think you can always sell silver. That's one of the beautiful things about it. So someone's saying, will silver be nationalized? Well, I don't know. Let me take a look at that. Let's take a quickie car wash look, and I'll cast the chart. You're not going to see what I'm doing here. I'm actually looking up at the screen up here. That's a good question. Will it ever be nationalized? I think what you're intending to ask is will it be used as a currency? I don't know if that's what you're asking. Here, I'll just cast this here. Will silver be nationalized? And I would think, this is one of the problems with doing charts. You have to be very specific in your intent. And let me take a quick look here and see what it says. I don't think anytime soon. No, that's what it shows. I think they're going to stick for right now, from what I can see, into fiat currencies or crypto. Digitized currency. And, when you think about it, we're almost there. How many people use cash? I know a lot of people do, but most people don't. They go in and, right now you can go up to the gas pump and hold your card up, right? And it reads it, beep, and you're ready to pump gas, right? Who wants to go stand in line and, wait for the cashier to take your money and what pump number are you on? You just hit your credit card. Won't be long. those chips will be in our foreheads. I hope not. I know I'm not going to get mine in the forehead, but I can tell you that the chart kind of says no, they're not going to nationalize silver. I think, though, with notwithstanding, I think silver is going to continue to go higher, and I think it's a really solid investment. I know many people who've gotten into silver years ago. They were paying $20, $30 an ounce, or actually less than that, 15, $10 an ounce. And it just, I think just a couple of years ago, it was at the high 20s. So and now silver's just bounced over $80 an ounce, and it's up and down a little bit, but it's quite substantial, the gains that have been made in that. And speaking of which, here's something that I've been working on. This is a really cool pendant. This is a good friend and client of mine. He wanted to make a pendant, and I said, rather than go out of gold, let's go out of silver. This is a really cool pendant. You can see here, it has his guardian angel across the bottom. And when I say guardian angel, that's calculated from the sidereal positions of the planets, the inner 7 planets in the birth chart. If you count, there's actually 7 letters here. And then on the upper left, on the bottom crescent here, it has what we call the Aleph Lamed. That in English means L, like Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel. All angels of divinity end in the suffix of L. And notice the back of this is open. And of course, it touches the skin. And you can see that's the third eye chakra and the heart chakra on there. These are actually etched right into the pendant, and that's hammered silver. I thought that was pretty cool, because speaking of silver, I thought, I've had a lot of people now who are going with silver, and it's a wonderful metal to work with. And conductivity wise, one of the theories behind gemstones contacting the body is you want the metal around it to conduct the energy. Well, silver is excellent for that. And so is gold, too. I have to say, you got to be careful, because when we talk about the conducting energy of gemstones, it's quite a bit different than electricity. And that's why I always make the gem touch the skin. And here's another really cool design here I'm working. In fact, I'm making a couple of these right now. This is a bracelet. And believe it or not, this is silver. This is antique glazed silver. And each of these gems were set to this person's birth chart. And you could see he wanted it stealth so that no one would see that he has gems on. Here's the outer external portion of that. You could see, you would never know those gems are there. So when he wears this, he said, I want it to look like an old, antique bracelet that no one would want to steal or stick a gun in my face. And yet he's got all these amazing precious gems, which are prescribed to his chart on the inside. So it's cool stuff. And, that's got me on the silver, trick there. And again, that's silver. That's actually been anodized to have that antique look. So it's a lot of cool stuff. And of course, I do have a lot of people who still like the gold, but boy, gold is pricey. Let me tell you, this is 24 karat gold here. And again, you can see the back of this touches the skin. So a lot of cool stuff. And, again, I have a lot of people doing simple pendants. Notice all these angels that are in there. See, every one of these pendants have an angel, which is really cool stuff, because it takes me a couple of hours, actually almost 3 hours, to do the calculations. But the most important thing is the angel corresponds to biblical encrypted passages in the Old Testament and the Tanakh, as well as the Psalms. And you can't make this stuff up. It's called gematria. It's numerology, and it actually corresponds. You can see oftentimes what tribe you're connected to, or ancient places in the biblical, realm, if so to speak, of where you might be descended from. Certain patriarchs and saints in the Bible are often referenced to the connections to your soul. It's pretty wild stuff. Can't make this up. It's called gematria. And it's literally using numerological correspondences to the biblical verses that are very encrypted and very secret. And again, I always say astrology it's literally a time machine. The earth is a time machine. And, when we talk about all these alignments that are going on right now and the world being crazy like it is right now, we look at these alignments. And again, the big picture is Uranus over the Pleiades right now, which is all happening in between this summer. This is going to be a really powerful and eventful year. And of course, everybody's been talking about disclosure and, things being revealed, quote unquote, by the government. I was just listening to Dan Aykroyd this morning talking about how he thinks stuff like that's going to happen. I do too. Many people are saying, again, the thrust that I've been saying on the podcasts as well as shows that I'm going on is that we are seeing a reality shift, literally a new time of reality coming in. And that's Neptune. Neptune is the subconscious portal to the so-called conscious mind. And, it's very interesting. I always mention Dr. Carl Wickland, who is by far probably one of my more favorite, psychiatrists, because he, again, like I said, wrote the book 30 Years Among the Dead, which in my opinion is probably one of the most incredible texts. Here, I'll show you. This is another one he wrote back here. This is The Gateway to Understanding. And he had some things in here where he was complaining back in the 1930s that he felt psychiatry and medicine completely ignored the other portions of who we are, the spiritual aspect. It was all, hardcore science and medicine, right? Which there's, some value to that, no question. There's a lot of people's lives who get saved by medicine and surgeries, et cetera, if you got to have them. But he really was a medical doctor who got into psychiatry. And again, for anybody who's not familiar, I always talk about him. He had his wife, who was a psychic channel. And Dr. Carl Wickland actually used shock therapy treatment to dislodge disincarnate souls, which is what we call ghosts. And there was a chapter I was reading in here that was absolutely amazing. And I really like him. He said, intelligent spiritual forces, in his opinion, were urging humanity to become aware of the other spiritual sides of themselves and, of course, these other realms. Because he says what I really think is so important, and that is we are all going to go back to the spiritual realm. And when you think about life, it's short. I mean, most of us will be lucky if we hit 85, 90, and even then, you can really become compromised as you get older. I mean, look at Clint Eastwood. He went from 6'4" to now he's a shriveled up little old guy, And what's great is he still has his mental faculties. He's still actually directing movies. I can't believe it. But, you got to face it. Reality is we are born, we grow, we mature, we experience, we atrophy, and we exit the physical realm. But what Dr. Carl Wickland's work is, and this is what I love about this guy. In fact, the more I study his work, the more I like him. Him and Carl Jung, both two extremely intelligent psychiatrists who came to the conclusion that life is a short blip on the radar screen of the soul. And it is. And what I loved about here, I'll just read this little paragraph here because this was amazing. He said, intelligent spiritual forces urge humanity to obtain a true understanding of life while here and a realization of the true relationship between the two worlds of the physical realms and the spiritual realms. Then they will not produce such vast numbers of earthbound spirits. Now, this is a psychiatrist who spent 30 years, remember, that's the title of the book, 30 Years Among the Dead, basically talking to people on the other side who were either possessing his patients. I've been studying Wickland a lot more. He actually created the Psychical Institute in Los Angeles. I think it was right around 1918. I wrote that down. I think it was 1918 or something like that. Yeah, it was actually 1918. He came to Los Angeles. It was the birth of Hollywood, and Los Angeles was just growing then. This is actually when Los Angeles was the city of geniuses. And what's interesting is he would get patients who were absolutely determined untenable. They couldn't do anything with them in the mental institution. So Wickland would take them and he would use shock therapy treatment to dislodge the schizophrenia or whatever. And it's still used to this day. Well, what did it do? It dislodged the ghost or it disincarnate spirit. Now, people say, well, geez, how do you know that's true? Well, he'd get in dialogue with these people through his wife as a channel, and then the patient would clear up. And I mean, they'd go home. This is documented cases. This is not, somebody, you know, doing some arbitrary stuff. This is in very clinical, documented cases. It's stunning. I encourage anybody to read 30 Years Among the Dead. It is just an enlightening text. And what his point was, and this is the point I want to drive home, and the point I always like to point out in astrology, we're all finding how accurate astrology is. In fact, the public is finding a much more greater interest in astrology in a deeper way from what I've noticed. They actually are getting that this is energy coming at them in general when I do readings, rather than just some karmic curse, which it could be that too. But it is literally energy unfolding on the soul. And if you look at it that way, rather than some superstitious way, is what I mean, it's really quite profound. And what Wicklund talks about is if you become aware of the other side, that your consciousness, and he spends a lot of time talking. This is really quite a book here. And he really goes into the dogma that is contained in certain religions. Not that religions are all bad, but he really gets it. This is an amazing book. It's called The Gateway of Understanding. And I think he wrote this in the 30s, and he died in 1945. And the sad thing is, when Wicklund passed away, all his work pretty much went to the dustbin. The allopathic psychiatric modalities went totally controlled by the pharmaceutical companies. And, I just talked to a very dear couple of friends of mine whose father passed away, again, in a very violent way, suicide, from very heavy psychotropic drugs. And I knew him. He was a client of mine. And I'm not saying all psychotropic drugs are bad. What I am saying is that Dr. Carl Wicklund pointed out that the causation of a lot of this stuff, massive depression, schizophrenia, etc., he found was disincarnate souls. And what is more fascinating about this is specifically what is talked about in the text that I talk about all the time, the Sharia Gilgam. It literally points this stuff out. In fact, there's a depossession ritual in the back of this book that's quite profound, uses the Psalms, uses certain prayers to dislodge any barnacle souls that are attaching to the aura. And again, people think, well, how could this be? But I can tell you, I have experienced 3 or 4 disincarnates leave my aura in clearings. And I've done it to other people in clearings, where I've literally cleared places that, again, ghosts would possess, or people who were possessed themselves. And it's deep stuff. And I'll tell you, that's where astrology is very interesting, because you can use interrogation astrology to determine whether it's a demonic spirit or whether it's a disincarnate soul. Most people are possessed by what they call thought form elementals and disincarnate souls. I have seen some pretty evil stuff. But, the exorcism stuff is definitely possible. I haven't personally run into really evil spirits like that, though I think we see it on the news every day, if you look close enough. But anyhow, the point is that we are, I think secular society negates the awareness to this to its detriment. And I think as we move on through these yugas, or what they call ages, as we process forward to what they call the galactic center, which is supposed to happen somewhere around 11,000 to 12,000 AD, which is a ways away. But we are on an ascensional path. And if you look back at history, we seem to have fallen in the sewer right around 300 BC. And that's when the cuneiform tablets were there. Writing was necessary. They say prior to that, consciousness was so expanded you didn't have to write. And that may definitely be a possibility. So interesting stuff. So again, that's why, the kings and queens would wear gemstones, is because they would have the vibration of the gem expand or push out consciousness. It's a very subtle thing, but it's very powerful. And you notice it after you wear them for 6 or 8 months. That's why I love Vedic planetary gemology, because what it does is it allows you to prescribe certain gems that are good for you, and you want to avoid certain gems. Isn't that interesting? Some gems can actually exacerbate yogas in your chart. And that's why, I got exposed to Vedic planetary gemology many, many years ago. And it took me a long time to really get it. And you have to study the Jyotish chart or Vedic astrology in your birth chart. And there are what we call combinations called yogas, meaning where the planets are placed. And it's very powerful for certain individuals to wear certain gems. Other gems you want to stay away from. Like if you wear certain gems that are malefically placed in house rulership or aspects, it can actually cause more trouble. When you wear good, I always try and find gems that are your core gems. Like most people have at least 2 to 3 gems they can always wear. They can draw a last breath with them. And a lot of times I find there's certain yogas in the chart. If you wear that gem, it triggers it. And it also saves you a lot of money because you only got to buy that one gem to really get that kind of benefit. So, and it takes time. I find after 6 months to 8 months, once the aura just gets cleansed and pushed out, it's kind of like Star Trek. Mr. Sulu put up the shields. Remember that one? That was back when Star Trek was good. Remember Captain Kirk? And they would literally find that the more they wore the gem, and I found the same thing, it pushes outside the energies. And again, it's all about fortifying the life force energy. That's what it's all about. And again, I've been really taken back with Dr. Carl Wicklund and Carl Jung too. These two psychiatrists broke the mold. They stepped outside of what everyone was telling them to believe and think and started doing true research. And the amazing stuff that they came up with is amazing. And I got to tell you, Dr. Carl Jung was really interesting. They're both named Carl, right? Carl Wicklund, Carl Jung. I didn't connect that until just now. But Carl Jung was, again, the protege of Freud, and then they broke off because Freud wouldn't have anything to do with astrology. And what was so interesting about Carl Jung is he did so much research into statistical analysis of astrology. And many people have done this, trying to disprove astrology. And he found, wow, this is amazing. And, I love his states of consciousness that he has. He actually there's 4 states of consciousness that he talks about. Wicklund talks about that same thing too, where we live in, and this is very parallel. Again, I love showing these diagrams. I love them because I think they really depict what's going on in our lives. And I'll put this back on the screen for anybody who hasn't seen these. But what's important here is you'll see when I come to this diagram, which is right over here, is the one that really tells all here. Obviously the easier way to come down the rabbit hole on this one is this diagram, which you can see is easier to identify because you got the body in there. But essentially, this big, thick dash line, if you will, is the division between so-called the subconscious mind and the conscious mind. But when you really look at Dr. Carl Jung's work, as well as Wicklund, they both say similar things, but different, but very similar. And that is they talk about you could divide the lower conscious mind into 2 levels. One is the emotional response patterns that we all have. And again, that is what I always talk about, and most Vedic astrologers do, is the moon and its placement in the birth chart. And I got to tell you, it's really, really accurate. The Vedic astrologers actually talk about something known as the manas of the moon. And here, now I can zoom in a little bit. You can see here, it's a little hard to see, but the moon is literally our emotional perception of reality. And when you think about it, no matter how logical we all act, we all emotionalize everything. We take logic and we emotionalize it. This is why AI ain't never going to be like you and I and anyone else drawing breath. Even the cold, hard, calculating business people. Do you ever notice how cold they are? They're not emotional, right? It's like they don't care about anybody. They're just acting rational. So it's very, very powerful. And what happens is you end up taking logic and we impressionize it. Those are called thought form elementals. And I can tell you this is exactly what the Magus Astrovolos focused so much on. And this is what we take with us when we exit this physical body. Now, back to astrology. What's interesting is astrology seems to modulate all these progressions and transits that we all receive experience. And what the world experiences are like portals, if you will, that are individually affecting us each, and also the collective global, you could say, energies. And again, this is what we've got going on. There's a powerful alignment right now. We're likely to see intensities increase during this month into February. It's going to become a blur. And let's hope it all resolves. Let's hope they can get a peace deal over there with Ukraine and Russia. And, this whole thing with Venezuela goes way down the rabbit hole, because this isn't just Venezuela. This is connected to the oil. The Chinese and the Iranians and the Russians were all encroaching down into the southern hemisphere. And it's also drugs too, but very, very interesting stuff. And, I always say to people in the Western world, be very careful, because it's a shame, but humanity always, if you look back through history, it's war after war after war after war. And, it's a shame that we have to use weaponry and protection and military like we do, but we do, because it's like two kids on a playground. The bully will kick the crap out of the one that he can, right? And if the bully realizes that he's probably going to get his butt kicked, he's probably not going to do it, right? Or he's going to think twice, I'll say that, especially if he knows he's not going to win. So this is the lower egoic plane, which you could take right down to an individual level or a global level. And what's interesting about this whole evolution of humankind right now, this Saturn Neptune is definitely shifting a reality structure, as the structure of, you could say, Saturn goes into the conjunction of Neptune, which has a deep, deep subconscious, newer perception of reality. So this is, again, in my experience, I have not seen this. I've gone through ChatGTP, and I've also looked at my programs. We have not had this happen in the first Egyptian bound of the sign of the tropical sign of Aries for probably close to 26,000 years. Another version said it was 9,000 years, but I can tell you this, it's been a long, long time, and very, very powerful. So I'm going to take a couple of looks here at the, people are mentioning here about kids today, the influences of music and all these different things. Oh, yeah. I mean, when you think about the mind control that goes on, I mean, I don't care where you turn. If you look at music, films, media, news, everything, George Carlin was right. They're beating you over the head with a club, telling you what to believe. And this is why, in some senses, this is actually tempering our mettle. And to those who come clean, though there's a lot of people who don't, we actually grow in consciousness. And that's what all the ancient mystics would teach. In fact, again, I mentioned Sermon on the Mount, excellent text, because it all talks about all causation is mental. And this is exactly what Dr. Carl Wickland, the Magus of Strovolos, and so many others have mentioned. And that is, the only thing you really own tax-free is your mind. And they're trying to get in that too, with every angle they can, from nanotechnology to external technology, and etc. And I think it's really important to realize the value of your mind, because these physical bodies will wear out sooner or later. And we definitely want to take care of them in the meantime. And of course, that's what's so cool about the new year. Everybody wants to set new goals and start new things. And it's good. That's an excellent thing to do. We should do that all year long instead of just on New Year's. Right? But very, very powerful time right now. And I think one of the things that we could find with these alignments, we may see not only weather get really intense. I know it's just been raining out here like crazy, and it doesn't let up until Wednesday. But we have had so much rain. It's incredible. And when you look around the world, the weather patterns have been really erratic. And I don't think it's global warming. I think it's the alignments with these planets, and also the sunspots, huge. And of course, we hear about, the comets coming in, and There's been a lot of talk resurging right now about Nibiru. Now, if anybody hasn't heard of that, that's believed to be this other star that we apparently have a binary star system that is sweeping by our solar system. Now, I've been hearing about Nibiru for 35, 40 years that it was going to come any day. And I don't get it's right now, but no one really knows. And I know the astronomers are doing all kinds of watching at some of these mysterious bodies out there. And it does affect the magnetics of our sun. And, the magnetics seem to go in a 12-year cycle, which is very interesting because that's Jupiter's cycle. So a lot of really powerful stuff here. If somebody's saying TV is the ultimate mind control, look at all the people who believe the news media. Oh, yeah. And even programs, you could see Hollywood has been a propaganda machine. And when you look at all the different movies that get funded, look at Hunger Games and so many other things that put these really dark energies into the youth, being hunted. Does that sound familiar? Bohemian Grove. For those who have ears that know what I'm saying. There's a lot of really interesting stuff that gets propagandized into this whole world. And it's not just through the media, it's through every angle. And now the internet is just inundating people. And, we got to really be mindful of this. Keep control of your mind. One of the most coolest things was Edgar Casey had talked, and he was another excellent psychic. And he said the most important thing he found was the powers of focus. And this is why meditation and getting your head out of the inundation of energy streams of media or anything else that propaganda is coming at you. And he said, listen to the inner voice inside. And this is capable of every single person. If we just clear off and focus on that inner voice inside. Dr. Carl Wicklund talked about this. There's an inner child within all of us. And whenever we get so concretized in our belief systems that we can't take anything else in, we close down. And this is, I think, what keeps reincarnation. And this is what many of these psychiatrists and psychologists talk about. And the astrology actually shows it. There's many people I do reading for, you can actually see this is an old soul and they're about to release. They're about to escape from Alcatraz. And it has a lot to do with the phases of the moon that you were born under and also the yogas in the chart. They call it attaining moksha. That was a word that was used in Sanskrit that means enlightenment or self-awareness. And again, I always mention one of my favorite mystics, and I mention him a lot, which is the Magus of Strovolos. If you ever acquire this particular book, which is called Esoteric Practices, he focuses on powers of the mind. He trains you to look at objects and then close your eyes and envision them. And then he trains you to recreate that elemental of that thing. This is used in Reiki and healing and all these different modalities of altering the physical world. In fact, the Magus of Strovolos was so advanced, he could rebuild bones. He could remove cancer cells. Anybody ever wants to read a book, and I mention this book a lot of people have thanked me for turning them onto it. This is a book, again, I'd love to throw out of helicopters, which again is known as the Magus of Strovolos. And again, that book was about a mystic and healer who lived on the island of Cyprus in the city of Strovolos, hence why it's named. And this book, I've read this book 30 times. It's been out now almost 35 years, about 30 something years. It was written in the late 80s. I think it was written in 1989 or something like that. And I got exposed to it in the very early 90s. And I just fell in love with the book because what it does is it shows that the human mind is so shut down compared to what it's capable of. And that's because we operate in that lower emotional portions of the mind. And it's interesting on astrology because I see how powerful these planets are. I've seen it in my own life where there was certain phases we go through that maybe we needed to go through. And that's why astrology isn't just a bunch of stars and planets. It's interconnected to the soul roots, which is way beyond what any astrologer, psychic, or mystic is going to fully unravel. And that is your soul is attached to different fragmentations and roots that are up on the upper tree of life, if you will, far above the physical realms of the universes or multiverses. And it appears, like I always say, forget Trinity, Neo, and Morpheus, it really appears that this matrix is interconnecting through what we call time. Time, a lot of mystics will say, oh, time's an illusion, right? And I always go, well, I don't know if it's an illusion. And again, I always say, drop a brick on your foot and call me on the first of the month. It's not an illusion. It's pretty doggone real, especially when you have health issues or legal issues or anything else. But it is. When you back out, it's our emotional reaction to everything that makes it so intense for us all. And there are some people who go through some really intense stuff. I remember my grandfather telling me when he turned 18 years old, he got a piece of paper. It says, show up at the recruiting office. You're going to World War One. So, and this has happened to a lot of people. Look what's going on in the world right now. I mean, and they're even talking about conscription here, mandatory for younger people. So, and then you're thrust into a reality structure that is totally foreign to your life. I mean, think about that. The different scenarios that we're all forced into. You get a lawsuit, you get a health issue, you get some other issue or a death in the family, or whatever. I mean, we are all going through this roller coaster of life. What amazes me is how accurately the astrology shows the timing of many of these events. So what it does for me, and I hear from a lot of other people, is it makes you aware that there are forces going on here on your life that are not necessarily something you can control, but you can by your reaction. And therein is the power of reaction. I mean, when I think back of some of the things people have gone through, including in my own life, you just go, wow, what was that all about, right? Johnny Depp put I think it was a YouTube thing out or an Instagram, and he was like, WTF, right, from last year. And we all kind of feel that way when we leave a year and go into the next, right? Some people have great years. Some people have roller coaster rides. And I can tell you that's where astrology is amazing, where you can actually see the cycles of where Saturn and Jupiter are. These are the hour and minute hands on the clock of life. And the doshas. I just had a client I did a reading for. I mean, talk about a traumatic situation. His father was shot right when he hit a K2 dosha, blown away in a business deal. And then his mother went to the market, the supermarket, a number of years later in the same K2 dosha. And there was a shootout, some robbers stealing stuff, the money or the payroll or whatever. And she gets killed in the crossfire. Had nothing to do with the robbery, gets killed in the crossfire. And then his sister dies in a car accident in Miami. Again, of no fault of hers, just got creamed and killed. So we see these crazy things happen in people's life. And of course, those are traumatic. I also see the good stuff too. It's amazing where you can see where somebody's just going to rock it. I actually did Dr. Carl Wickland's birth chart, which was really fascinating. He was born in 1861. I could talk about a while back, huh? So that was literally during the Civil War. He was born in Sweden. And then he moved to the United States, I think, right around 1896. And then from there, he moved to the United States in 1881. So that gives you an idea how long ago Dr. Carl Wickland's work was. And amazing mind on this man. And I look at his birth chart, incredible. He had a Raj Yoga Mars at the midheaven, but most importantly, he had an exalted Jupiter conjunct Ketu. And I find this throughout history. They always say that the yogas connected to Jupiter and Ketu show the spirituality. If you have in your chart aspects between Jupiter and Ketu, it often means that soul has been exposed to a lot of mysticism in the past and spiritual work. And I always say Jupiter's the blessings on the soul. So we're not dealing with just stars and planets here in yogas. We're dealing with a matrix of time on each soul, completely and 100% individual and unique. Not a single person is ever going to experience the same thing exactly twice. Absolutely amazing. So, yeah. Yes, a lot of comments here on religions, and yeah, George Carlin might have said it best. The best thing that come out of all the religions was the music, right? Not that I don't see some great truths. Again, I was really exposed to a lot of very advanced religious things. I had a studio back in the late '70s, early '80s, and I was hired by this religious organization to record a bunch of theologians who would meet in Chicago. It was called the Bellarmine Retreat House. All these theologians would fly in and they would espouse different things. And I've had a lot of exposure to a lot of different religions. And there's a lot of great information and truths in a lot of them. The problem is the dogma is politicized and then used again to bend your mind around to the purposes of what they want. And I think the reason, people get upset is because of that dogma. But if you go back to many of the truths in all of them, it's quite profound. So it's not to get into that whole political or religious thing, but people are mentioning it here, and I figured I would just comment on that. So, yeah, I would tell you that a lot of good comments here. And again, one of the things that always comes up, somebody's mentioning Judgment Day. Well, I personally think, yeah, there's probably a lot of truth to Revelations. There's no question about that. And many people have speculated when that's going to come. I don't know. And I don't know that anyone can call that one, but it does appear that we hit marker points in time where it seems like Revelations. And I think Judgment Day is when we exit the body and it appears that we go into hierarchical places on the tree of life, and there is an angelic hierarchy. There's the Egyptians used to say, the angels can see into your soul like a pane of glass. You can't lie, you can't hide it. It's all there. And we all have what we have, and you cannot hide that. And when we exit this body, it literally says many souls get trapped down into the lower earthly sphere, which is what we call ghosts and people dwelling in places. They even sometimes say that in the Shari Gilgam talks, how certain souls are actually forced into inanimate objects for periods of times and even attached to animals and other things. It sounds crazy, but there may be a lot more truth to that than we know, because I have seen some pretty bizarre things that have happened. So in terms of depossessing things, I've even seen objects like chairs, buildings, or certain places in neighborhoods or roads that have spiritual things attached to them. Now, that's debatable whether it's disincarnate souls or elementals, which are thought form energies that have collectively stayed there. And it could be demonic forces too. So this stuff gets way down the rabbit hole, but very, very interesting to look into. And again, this is all called paranormal phenomena, right? But it's really what the psychiatrists and many paranormal researchers have found, particularly Edgar Cayce's and others, who really look at what is the universe? What is this place? It's a place where spirit becomes manifest and experiences in time and space. And our reality structures are built through everything that we're interconnected with. They say the lower conscious mind is so inundated with the five senses that it often totally blocks the psychic phenomena that we're all capable of getting to. And, there's this term that many mystics use and remote viewers use. It's called non-localized consciousness. Well, what does that mean? Well, that just means consciousness that leaves the body. It's non-localized, right, in your body. So there's all these fancy terms, but in common sense purposes, what that means is you're taking your consciousness and leaving the body and going somewhere else with it. That's what we do every night when we dream. And what's interesting is how astrology works. Astrology seems to work on the localized consciousness, the physical realm, the dense lower emotional body layer. It's absolutely blows my mind at how accurate these transits and progressions in a person's birth chart are, including the doshas. Like in the Kalashaka dosha, which is one of the most amazing types of ancient Vedic astrology. Very few astrologers really understand it. It's very ancient. It took me a long time to understand, and I'm still understanding it. I mean, you'll never figure this stuff all out. But what's fascinating about it, kala means time, and chakra means wheel. It's the infinity loop of time. Like Donald Trump, he's got a quantum leap coming up. And what does that mean? Well, that just means, see, these are based in the lunar zodiac, which is a zodiac between the Earth and the moon. You can't see it. You can't take a telescope and look at it. I always say I don't care how much the astronomers polishes the lens on their telescope. They're not going to see that zodiac either. Again, hard astrophysicists laugh at astrology because they say, well, wait a minute, we're looking at gravity and masses and gases and all this other stuff, which is great. I respect hard sciences. But on the other flip side of the coin, it's undeniable. And again, I was a skeptic of astrology. My mother was the one who said, Jeffrey, the reason you're having such a crap storm is because you've got this aspect going over this. It was Saturn over my moon called Sadi Sante. And I was like, wow. And then when she showed me the timing, I went, my jaw dropped. I'm like, that's exactly when I was stumbling around in depression. So this is interesting. And when I saw that, or realized that is a better word, I changed my reaction to it. And see, that's the power that I find that I love helping people with, is this is not you. It's something you're experiencing. It's an energy. It's like the driver in the car. Very good analogy. If you're going down the road and the guy runs the stoplight or does something stupid, or the person, you're interacting with on the road, it's not your fault. It's something you got to contend with. Right. And if you don't contend with it, if it's severe enough, you're going to get in an accident or potentially even killed. So it's all about awareness, focus, and reaction. And that's the thing. And some things are really hard to react to. Like I've seen individuals who, like I crashed into the front of a car on a motorcycle in the late 70s, right exactly when I had progressed Mars conjuncting Mercury. It was called the primary direction. And I didn't catch it because I was in my lower emotional mind, and I always find that I'm reading for everybody else, but a lot of times I miss stuff going on with me. Right. And it's very easy to do. It's like the doctor who's trying to help everybody else. And then, they get sick. Right. So it's kind of like that. And I have to say, it's stunning when you go back in retrospect and look at these energies and how powerful they are. I mean, I've seen stuff that's so accurate, it's creepy. Even phases in business and peaks and valleys. And, what do you do with this information? Again, it helps you to emotionally react and or potentially prepare too for certain things. So it's quite amazing. So anyways, someone says, ain't that a kick in the head? Yeah. And sometimes it feels like a kick in the head. And sometimes it feels like wind at your back too. See, when you get positive aspects of Jupiter and different things that are really good in the chart, or you hit doshas that are in good yogas, people take off. I was actually examining Dr. Carl Wickland's death, and most people will exit the physical plane when the planet of karma, Saturn, conjoins Ketu, which is the exit out of the theater. That's what Shakespeare said, the whole world's a theater, right? So Ketu often is associated with liberation of karma, or time, if you will. And Jupiter goes over the North Node, and Mars is intermixed in there. And I lost both of my parents in a Ketu dosha when Saturn was over Ketu and Jupiter was in association with the North Node Rahu in Vedic astrology. And it's kind of interesting how accurate it is. And I've noticed health issues tend to really get exacerbated on certain hard aspects. And when you have Jupiter associated with Rahu, I don't care how young or old you are. Now, some people are really robust and they get through it just fine, or they find this is a period of, dragging the box up the hill without wheels. But when you understand it, it changes your habit patterns, or at least aligns you with more awareness. And the human mind's smart. We start taking action in a more positive way, which is what it's all about. So yeah, a lot of people are making some good comments here. And this was a fun kind of discussion. And I just kind of wanted to tie this in because, again, where are we all going here? You can't stop these energies that are in the sky. You can't stop the weather, right? But you can react to it. It's like, when it's raining, what do? You get an umbrella, right? So you react, you see. And this is a time, I think, and I'll be talking about this later today on the show when I come up here. This is going to be, what is it here? I'm going to be doing, I mentioned it before. Quite frankly, yeah, I like him a lot. He's a nice guy. And we're going to be talking about these energies more in depth. I also did the Veritas show with Mel, and we got into some fun stuff there for a couple of hours. And again, I always like to tie this back to the mind. The mind is the most important thing in the universe. In fact, they say divinity, God, if you will, created all of creation. And take a look around your life. Look at all the stuff we got. Remember George Carlin? Where are you going to put all your stuff? I mean, when we look at all of our material belongings, and we also look at the infrastructures of our life, it's incredible. It's incredible. I mean, if you get away from the dogma and the news and all the crap that's beating you over the head, you start realizing, wow, life is profound. When you see someone get sick and they can't walk across the room, nobody thinks about how amazing it is to have your eyes, ears, nose, and your body functioning, right? Well, go watch somebody sometime who's sick or they can't walk. I know I had my hip lock up here a couple of years ago on a stairway. I was walking and it was so severe, sciatica. And because I broke my leg years ago on that motorcycle accident. And it really wakes you up. You go, whoa, wait a minute. This is something you never think about because we just run around and do everything we do, right? And then all of a sudden you realize, wow, what an amazing, thing it is to just walk across the room without pain or without some other thing. And I talk to so many clients. That's why I love compensating with various things like reflexology, right? Taking care of your health, and herbs are just amazing. So a lot of ways, it's all about reaction. And again, I'll finish with this. I love this book, The Gateway of Understanding, because I don't think anybody's addressed the issues, the truths in religions and the dogmas and falsehoods in religions as quite elegantly as Dr. Carl Wickland did in The Gateway of Understanding. And he actually says, when we exit the body, his experience is that the more open and childlike we are, look at children. Most of them are so open. They're just happy, fun, go lucky. That's where they're so fun to be around. I love kids. They're just little angels, especially in the very first 7 years. That's the 7-year itch, right? Every 7 years you go through sun, moon, all the way to Saturn. And what's interesting is the childlike innocence and openness is what he says seems to open up souls migrating forward. They're not all concretized in all the, kicking the heads that they've got or, experiences that they had here. They are not so emotionally damaged from it. They actually just treat it as an experience. They call it stoicism. And that's what many of the ancient mystics spoke about, is becoming stoic, not reactive, just experience. And it's not to say you should become a zombie. What it means is you rise up above and look down at things with more of a point of wisdom. And, it's amazing. I was just talking to my sister-in-law. She watched her father burn in the house and she wanted to go in and get him out. And she said to me, it was horrible. She had to watch, and her dad was an amazing guy. I saw it in her chart. And you think about the experiences we all have, and it's life is a roller coaster ride, man. It's not easy. And Earth is a place of reality and time and space that's very, very real. But when you back it all out, it's just an experience. So no matter how good or traumatic it is, we have to step outside of ourselves and keep that level of sanity. And again, I love Carl Jung and Carl Wickland. I didn't put that together. They're both named Carl. Isn't that interesting? But good stuff. I'll tell you that. Good stuff. And the Magus Astrobolos too. So anyways, I got to run here, but I really appreciate everybody joining me. A lot of great comments here. Wow. I wish I had time to go through all of these. I always say that too. Yeah. Someone's saying, what's my feelings on 3i Atlas? I think they're hiding it from us. I think there's bodies that come through that they don't really disclose what's going on. And I can tell you, someone made a good comment here. They're saying no one's coming to save you. That's right. No one is. You got to save yourself. when you really look at it in the end, you came in here all alone, you're going to leave here all alone. But that's where the interesting thing about angels and spirits is we're not alone. We are a fragment of the divine. And that really shows up when you read these ancient texts. There's not another text quite like the Sharia Gilgam. And it does appear we are all in some type of a matrix of evolution of the soul. And this, they actually say after a number of incarnations, we actually go into what they call self-awareness. It's called hokmah in the Aramaic and the Hebrew, which means self-awareness, or we start remembering everything in the past. We're not blocked anymore. So this world is definitely an interesting little matrix here, because it's almost designed in some senses to keep us trapped here. Some people call it the soul trap. I think it's the soul experience syndrome is really what it is. So, yeah, someone's saying Judgment Day is a religious thing. And I agree with Jeff. When we exit purgatory, the lower levels of our soul is ready to ascend. Yeah, there seems to be, it's interesting how the religions got this whole purgatory thing, because it does appear that there is dimensions that the soul goes through. And they actually say it's more like a washing machine, where when we dive off the ladder out of the upper spiritual realms down into creations, they actually say the physical realms or worlds are actually combined with the forces of good and evil. It's just a part of it. You have to have juxtaposing forces. Look at an atom, protons, electrons, and the whole thing is based on conscious reaction. It's really wild stuff here. And the soul gets fragmented. And they say that it's almost like the soul has to be cleansed out of the demonic forces that were intertwined into the genetic constructs, if you will, that the vessel of the soul experiences, or the soul experiences in the vessel. And in order to escape from Alcatraz, that has to be cleansed out before we go up into the upper realms. It's kind of like wipe off your feet before you enter the next room, right? So it's kind of like that. And the documents really do support that. And again, a lot of interesting stuff. And it's really a shame that people like Dr. Carl Wickland, Carl Jung, are not more revered and their works are studied more. I just ordered the second version of 30 Years Among the Dead. I didn't know there was a volume 2. Apparently, it's been out of print, and I just ordered it, so I'm going to get it here very soon. But I love these stories in 30 Years Among the Dead about all these disincarnate souls who now actually are able to speak through Dr. Carl Wickland's wife, the medium, and he gets them to rationalize. Now, this is someone who doesn't have a body. Remember, they're possessing another body. He gets them to rationalize that they are not alive as we would call it, but their consciousness is. And when they wake up and they stop staying in this spin cycle loop of consciousness that's down here in the lower emotional realms, they all of a sudden start seeing relatives. Or like Patrick Swayze, remember when he looked up and saw the light after he was shot and he saw Molly holding him there on the street? If you haven't seen Ghost, go see Ghost. I love Ghost. One of my favorite movies. And I think it's probably a more accurate depiction of really what does happen when we exit these bodies, which we're all going to do, right? And he had the heavens open up, but then he turned back and saw Molly holding him, and then he ran up and he stayed in the lower earthly sphere. Everything is consciousness. Everything is consciousness. It's interesting. I built my bookshelf back there. You can see I don't have my picture anymore. And it's so fun. I actually built a little squirrel thing the other day. Ella said, hey, I want the squirrels to, so I helped her build a squirrel thing. And everything starts out, all causation is mental. I took a piece of paper and I started making a cut sheet because I used to do a lot of woodwork. I love woodwork and a lot of fun to make stuff. So I had all these old wood shelves out in the garage and I decided, hey, I'm going to cut this up and use it and make a little bookshelf, right? So what did I do? I write down on a piece of paper the dimensions, do measurements, all that, and then you make a cut sheet. So you plan everything out first, and then you double check your measurements, and then you go cut away and grind it, saw it, and stain it and put it up there, right? And then you throw your books in there. So that's just a simple example of everything, all causation is mental. And they actually say the seraphims, cherubims, and the thrones are very high angels in the upper realms, that if they weren't literally consistently chanting the permutations of something that's exceedingly complex, which they say is divine names from God, the entire lower physical realms of the universe would cease to exist in less than probably a picosecond, maybe less than that. So the whole thing is consciousness. It's all mind. And we spend most of our days, just in the realms of emotional reaction. And that's why it's really important, because life isn't easy. You got to really stay focused. And it's interesting. I find how accurate astrology is. If you just follow Mars going around your chart every 2 years, it's stunning the houses it goes into and the aspects it makes. So they say in the future, people are going to get much more interested in the magic of, you could say, the energies that release through the celestial phenomena we call astrology. And I can see why. It's caught my attention, I'll tell you that. Because again, hard science laughs at it because they can't repeat it twice. But you actually can see it being repeated a lot in the cycles of your chart, even in the yearly cycles. It's absolutely amazing. And some cycles are only once in a lifetime. But when you see how accurate they are when they happen, oh my God, so powerful, so powerful. And my mother got me into the health issues. It's absolutely phenomenal how the ebbs and flows of the physical life force flow is affected by these. And there's a lot of great old books that talk about what they call apothecary and medical astrology. And again, it's not to say modern allopathic medicine doesn't have its virtues, because it does. It's very advanced science. I mean, look what they can do with MRIs, ultrasounds, etc. I mean, so many women are able to have children because of modern medicine. And believe me, I know if it wasn't there, a lot of women died giving birth. And today, so many more do live and get through pregnancy and birth. And you can't throw that whole element out the window either. But if you look at the ancient astrology, and I've had so many astrologers actually say, geez, we wish we could bring the arts of Ayurveda and astrology into the allopathic worlds. But again, it's all about money, right? So hopefully, as time progresses, we'll see that happen more and more and more. So again, read the Magus of Astrologers. You want to talk about health? Oh boy, that guy, he did some amazing things. And so did Rife. So interesting stuff. I got to run here. Again, thanks so much. Yeah, someone's mentioning here, Tesla beginning to sell robots to the general public. Tesla will be worth multiple trillions. Yeah, somebody's apparently got a thread here going on with Tesla. Yeah, see, think about that. We are in an era of reality change like we've never seen before, ever. Not in modern times. The Tartarian stuff begs to differ. But we're in a dangerous realm here right now, where technology in the physical scientific world, it's really going to take off. I mean, it's going to get like Terminator technology here, if it's not already there. From what I've heard, it may be real close. So it's all energy. So, all right, everybody. Well, thanks for joining me. I'm going to run. God, so many great comments here. I mean, it's this is the problem with lives, is I've got to run this computer and keep my brain focused, and also read the comments. And I have to tell you, some great comments here. People really come up with a lot of great stuff here. And it'd be fun if I could get everybody in a chat room, but we'd be there all day. So yeah, a lot of great comments here. Look at this. Yeah, so many things. Could we talk about the nadis next Sunday? I mean, the text. Oh yeah, the nadis are amazing. There's so many cool depths to Vedic astrology. And also I would urge you to not negate the Egyptian, Chaldean, and so-called traditional astrology. The Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, the Chaldeans, breathtaking stuff. I mean, and what's so fascinating about all these ancient cultures, they all pointed to one thing and one thing only: the soul's journey in time and space. That's what astrology really is. It's the unfoldment of that little pie slice of the soul's journey in these vehicles, or vessels, if you will, called bodies. The mother creates a garment for the soul to experience time and space. And what's even more mystical is why we're so knocked out. We literally get knocked out. And that also allows the innocence of childhood to happen. And they say, and that's what Wicklund talked about the most. If we can go back to that unconcretized innocence, in other words, this hard, fast, well, I believe, right? You just keep your mind open. As we get older, we start seeing that we really could advance so much more. And it's all an experience. It really, really is. So yeah, the great comments. So many great comments here. Yeah, everything is about interactions between electricity and magnetism. Yeah, that's interesting. Magnetism, you bring that up, and there's, I think, forces so far beyond that Dr. Claude Swanson and I had some great discussions. If anybody doesn't know who he was I really enjoyed Claude. He used to come over to my house in Tucson, and we would have these discussions. He wrote a book called the Hidden Forces of the Universe. Here, I'll play this clip.
Astrology is one of those really difficult things for a hard scientist to understand. For a long, long time, I didn't believe that it was even possible to have astrology. It must be delusion, because the normal physics education teaches us about what are supposed to be the forces in the universe, and there's gravity, and there's electromagnetism, and there's a strong and weak force, and all of those forces diminish with distance, so that except for gravity and electromagnetic forces, everything else is really just too weak. And so most physicists say, well, how can the planets have any effect at all on things that happen around us day to day? The gravitational force is extremely weak. The planets don't have a charge, therefore there can't be any effects. And that's the normal mainstream view of things. And I used to believe that for a long time. In the mid-'80s, I began realizing that there were some other things that go on in the universe besides those basic forces. In my book, The Synchronized Universe, talks about the paranormal and looks at all the research in different aspects of the paranormal. We find that there are lots of things, like remote viewing, where the effect does not diminish with distance, where it can pass through barriers, where it kind of defies the rules of mainstream physics, and yet at this point we've proven it. It's been proven to a very high accuracy statistically.
See, so he and I would have all these discussions about torsional waves. And again, all of us are thinking in a three-dimensional, 5-sense, hardcore way to put our hands on something, right? Well, when you talk about spirit, you talk about consciousness, and you talk about the forces of astrology, you can't apply that. It doesn't work that way. Same thing with gemstones. People say, well, do they have power? No, they don't. They resonate power. Well, what power are they resonating? Well, it's very mystical, because when you, and what's interesting is it'll resonate different for you than it will for me or anyone else, depending on the yogas in your chart. That's the secret mystics knew in Vedic planetary gemology, which every gem is not for everybody. It is very specific. Now, there are a lot of gemstones. They have what they call navgraha pendants, where you get all 7 planets. Sometimes that's not good, because it just amplifies the entire chart. Well, you may not want to do that. You can actually tweak it. It's like turning screws to get certain gems that amplify certain yogas in your chart. And these are the forces, he's referring to, and no one can figure it out. I can't figure it out. One thing's for sure is all of the texts talk about angels. I had a client ask me a really cool question the other day. He's a good friend of mine too. And he said, Jeff, he says, what's the oldest astrology book you have? And I said, wow. I said, when I think about it, the oldest one is the Sefer Ratziel Hamalak. And what is that? Well, that's the book of the Archangel Ratziel. Now, a lot of scholars will say, well, wait a minute, that's a 13th century grimoire. No, it's not. I have several versions of that. And if you Google it, you'll find there's several different versions out right now. Translations is what they are. And what I found is I have an old one. There's not even cantillation marks in it. It is believed to be a text that was sent to Adam when he was cast down into the physical realms. Think about that. So, again, I always talk about how the physical realms, or the journey of the soul from where it was created, down into the physical worlds. You got to remember that division right there, number 3, where it says the worlds of Yetzirah. That is where the multiverses are. That's where you start heading down into these various different realms of creation. And what's interesting is, what are all these forces? They're not just electromagnetism or magnetism or gravity and all these other things that physicists rightfully have made a lot of great science out of, or use those forces anyways to better mankind. But when we talk about consciousness, Dr. Carl Wicklund is speaking to people outside of bodies, okay? And this is in theory. He's cured patients. Again, 30 Years Among the Dead is amazing. The Magus of Strovolos. Those are just a couple books that I mention a lot that just unequivocally prove consciousness is not material, and it's not electricity, it's not magnetism, not gravity, or any of the other forces that science can readily put their hands on or stick a meter into and measure. So it's really deep stuff. And yet we all have that. You can't escape it. We can go to sleep and dream, but next day you got to wake up and deal with your perception of reality. You can't escape it. So we all have what we're going through. We're all dragging that box of rocks up the hill without wheels, right? But when you stop reacting to it that way, my grandmother, I love her. She was born in 1907. She says, if you got to do it, learn to like it. And those are old expressions, but there's a lot of great truth to that. If you got to do something, put your heart into it. And that's why I think we've seen the decline of society. It's actually demonic when you think about it. It's actually become fashionable to become dissensional, to create trouble, disagree, fight. What do they always say? Oh, fight, right? So, it's interesting if we focused on create, right? So that's the magic of creation. And this is why the demonic forces are actually trapped into the lower realms. That Garden of Eden story may be a lot more true than we know, because it shows up in all the ancient texts, which turned into religions. And that is, the evil spirits are literally incarcerated into matter. That's why there's birth, growth, maturity, atrophy, and death, as we call it, in the physical realms. They said it happens to everything. I don't care if it's human or more advanced forms, animal, plant, or mineral. Even the universes, they say, get destroyed about every 4-point-something billion years. And that's what all the scientists are saying. Oh, the universe is about 4.6 billion years old. How about that? So interesting stuff. And we always have these demonic forces that infiltrate the structures of society. And that's why we see the wars and the dissension and the killing and all the crazy stuff we see. The demonic forces are there, and they're constantly at work. It's up to us to straighten our mind and realize, hey, and that's where astrology is interesting, because we're seeing, you know that attack in Venezuela happened exactly on the full moon as it was opposing Mars. It was right on. I said, I told my son, he was out driving that, and I said, be careful. I said, we get some nasty energies tonight. And this is where we're at in this world right now. Massive changes in our perceptions of reality. And I actually think, even though the world's crazy and it's going to be the roller coaster ride, it's an expansion of consciousness. And because we're more exposed now than ever before to this plethora of information, the key is sorting out what's real and what's, urinating down your back and telling you it's raining. Sorry about that expression, but it's kind of what it is sometimes. So I have to run here. Everyone, have a great beginning of the week. And I hope your new year is starting out good for you, and that you're focusing on whatever it is you want to focus on. And I'm going to try and have Ella and I bring in some pre-recorded ones where we can get more in depth. Again, I wish I had more time to address all of your comments, because it's so good. A lot of smart people here are making some great comments, and I really appreciate that. And a lot of cool stuff. Yeah. All right. Well, you all take care and have a good beginning of your week. And I hope your New Year goals all come to fruition. We'll talk to you soon.